Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Ashley Ahmadzai here, the Psychic Life Coach. I am so excited to come to you guys with another Thought Leader Thursday. You know, every week I'm bringing on the best of the best, the most empowering people that I know. And I'm so excited. Our friend Caitlyn Picerno, I can see in the background, your background is moving. Do you have an animal behind you?
Yeah, there's several. I have my cat on my lap, and then we got a new kitten, so she's trying to play with the tapestry. So we refer to this place as the jungle because we also have a puppy, and then we also have two fish tanks. So
Wow, perfect, because Caitlyn is an intuitive healing coach and also an animal communicator. So that makes perfect sense.
absolutely.
Absolute perfect sense that you'd have them. So I am so happy that we met. Do you remember how we met? Was it through a Facebook group?
I don't remember how we met. I think it must have been.
Yeah, so I think I saw you in a group and I was like, who is this person? She intuitive. You had me at intuitive and I was like, all right, she's my people. I'm so excited to learn from you and discover who you are. And that's kind of how we started communicating. And then I was like, all right, you're the only animal communicator that I know. And we haven't had a real conversation outside of this. So
Right.
I'm learning as well. I am just over the moon excited to find out what that even looks like and how that's such a powerful tool for us in our own healing. So Caitlyn, tell us a little bit about you. How did you become the animal communicator, the intuitive healing coach?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me, Ashley. It's so exciting to meet all you guys and to get to know you as well. So, man, it is a loaded journey of where I started. So, I mean, it's kind of, I started when I was really young. I always had this beautiful connection with animals, and I always felt like they could understand me more. Like, if I was not around animals, I was not as happy, my vibes were not as high, and I could just tell. And then, but I really got into the animal communication about 4 or 5 years ago. I had a horse and I was in New Mexico for college, and I've been riding my entire life, and horses are one of the most amazing creatures to connect with. There is just, I mean, your heartbeat can sync with a horse's heartbeat. So it's like the physical kind of connection as well as that beautiful energetic connection. But I had a horse, and he was, I don't even know how to explain him. He was so freaking wild, and but we were two peas in a pod. And when I went to New Mexico for school, I was in a really abusive relationship, and I was having a really tough time down there. And I started noticing it with my horse. I was out at the barn every single day. And when I had a really hard day, which was more frequent than not at that point, he would just act up, and he would buck, and he would rear, and he would just give me, a ton to deal with in the ride. And when I had a really good day, he was super calm and, just a blessing to ride. And so I really started noticing kind of the interactions we would have and how he was kind of vibing off of me. And so I was like, okay, this makes sense. And then about 2 years ago, he started acting a little different, and he started getting really spooky, and I started having dreams about 3 months before I ended up having to put him down, that he was going to leave this earth and that our time had come to an end. And I was like, okay, what's going on? And I had a bunch of vets out and nobody could figure it out. And I was like, okay, I'm going to really try to tap in and communicate with him. And I know I can do this. And I tapped in, and he showed me that he had a brain tumor and that he was going blind. And I had some tests that were still pending from the vet. And I asked him what he wanted me to do, and if he wanted me to run more tests to see if there's anything we could do. And he asked me to let him go. And the test got confirmed that he did have a brain tumor, and I let him go right before I actually got the results of that. So sad story, but he was, and he still hangs around, because he's still kind of in my field, and he was one of the biggest teachers of my life. And so that was kind of how I started my animal communication. And then, I started doing little free sessions with other people's animals and went from there. And then kind of the intuitive coaching also kind of came along with that journey as well. I started, are you seeing her move the, she's so interested in it. And she's trying to go underneath it and behind it. Sorry, it's a tapestry. So
The jungle, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So anyways, with the coaching, I was working, I've always loved helping people. So I volunteered since I was 13. I had been volunteering, and I worked with, I started at an animal shelter, then I went to a retirement community, then I went to a domestic violence shelter, a homeless shelter, and then I got a job at one of the domestic violence shelters, and I really started working with the crisis line and was like, I want to pursue this passion. So I went to school for my bachelor's degree in human services for mental health counseling, and when I did my internship, I actually worked in a corrections facility. It was a residential treatment facility for men and women in corrections. And most of them had been there for 20, 25 years in prison. They'd been there, and this was like a last stop shop. And so throughout that whole journey, I was really just able to figure out how, all these people that are going through really tough times have a lot of the same stuff going on. And at that time, I had gone through my own personal journey with the abusive relationship, and I started working with a spiritual coach, and my whole life changed. I saw kind of with the traditional approaches and the spiritual practices together with the animals all in it, how it just was so beautifully meshed together and made a huge difference. And I kind of started coaching business a couple years ago, and the rest is kind of history. Kind of a long introduction, but that's my story.
Oh, that is so profound. And I actually, if you guys watch the replay of this, I was like, don't burst out into tears. Don't burst out into tears as we're talking, because I know what you're talking about. And actually today I had a vision of me on my horse, because I had ridden horses my whole life. They were like my therapy. And there was like this really, it's actually one of the most devastating things in my life that I, to this day, have not really been able to get over. And my horse was taken away without me knowing. And I was like, where's my horse? And all of a sudden he wasn't there. And I just remember that was all that I had, because whenever you could have the craziest day, right? And then you would go ride your horse, and it was just so grounding. And
Absolutely.
it's without, you don't have to have a conversation. They don't ask how you are. They just know. And it's kind of like this like telepathic communication and understanding. And when we start tuning into that, that's when magic happens, right? As opposed to, oh, how are you? Good, good. Have a good day. Bye. Like the superficial level that we live on occasionally, most of the time, in this like worldly world. But animals, it's a whole nother level, because there's the feeling, there's the knowing, there's the communication. So I was like, my heart was like,
yeah. Absolutely. No, I understand that. I mean, like you said, it's the hardest thing one of the hardest things you'll have to go through. And that was the same thing for me. Like I said, like he was a rescue horse, and people are like, oh, it's so great that you rescued an animal. No. He rescued me 100%. And that's why a lot of people, you see animal communicators and you see coaches, and they do beautiful work, but there's such a lack in bringing them together, and they're not separate at all. I mean, what our animals do for us and how much they are some of our biggest teachers is beyond anything else that a coach can tell you, or you can go within. Our animals show us different behaviors that we're not wanting to look at. When your animal's acting up, they're showing you what's going on inside you. Our environment matches us. And so our animals are, so in tune with that. And they're so in tune with all of our energy, and they're feeling it constantly.
Mm-hmm. And the other idea of like unconditional love, right? In a world where even love can feel superficial, right? Like I'm reading a book right now, and it's about a gentleman who trains professional athletes. And he's like, you become famous as an athlete, and all of a sudden your friends list grows by, a couple thousand people. And so we can live in the space of like superficial love, or like, who can I really count on? Who can I this, that? And your animals, I was pet sitting for my best friend and her dog, Kaya. And I don't have a lot of experience with animals, but Kaya, granted, she knows me. I've like known her since she was a puppy, but she would follow me around everywhere that I went. I would take a shower and she'd be right there. I'd wake up in the morning and she'd be like licking my hand that's hanging off the edge of the bed. And I never felt more, well, it's not totally true, because I have like a daughter and I have a husband, and they're both really amazing, but I just felt so loved in a different way. And so I think it's so beautiful that you meld the coaching with the animal communication, because you're bringing them in as an essential piece to that healing, to that understanding. And it's easy for us to overlook that if we're not paying attention to it. And it's like, duh, like,
Absolutely.
So cool. So tell us about, how does that work in your practice? Do you do it separately where someone's like, my animal is sick, can you tune in? Or is it someone who has like a individual issue, and then you help them, you include the animals in that? How does that work?
So I offer them all kind of separately. So I work with a lot of clients in the intuitive coaching that don't have animals, and that's completely fine. And then I work with a lot of people who do have animals, and they are like, oh, can you start off doing an animal communication session? And absolutely, I do that as well, where kind of like an animal is sick or has that behavior. The thing with the animal communication session is, like I said, it's never separate. So when I'm kind of working with an animal, I'm going to pick up on the person. We're going to be working together in that sense as well. So I do offer them separately, and then I don't have like an offer where it's like, oh, you and your animal. It's kind of just, if you have an animal, they're going to
like marriage counseling.
So if you have an animal, they're going to come in our session. And if you don't, then we just work together as kind of the coaching. Oddly enough, though, a lot of the clients that I have who have not had animals have had either animals from their past come back in, or they will adopt an animal in their life. So
Yeah, that is so powerful. And like, I don't want to cry. I don't want to like totally go into it. But as soon as you were talking about like your horse, I have one horse who's like my buddy. I don't want to cry, so I'm just gonna like touch the surface of it. But his name is Squeaker. And he was like my heart. Oh my gosh, he like taught me so much. And he was like my therapy horse and like the hardest times of my life. And then I ended up being taken away from that family, and I haven't had that communication with him. And I remember like when I was little, this is just a funny story. I didn't really know how to pray, so I would make it up, and I'd say, dear God, thank you for this, that, and the other. And, great. Amen. I go into that. It's more in depth. But as a kid, it's so simplified. And I would say, can you please connect me to Squeaker? Okay, Thanks, God. Thanks, God. And I'm like, hey, Squeaker, how was your day? It was good. Yeah, gosh, I really missed you. And yeah, da 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 da. I was like, okay, all right. See you later. Good night. Love you. Okay, God, can you connect me with Clover? Mm-hmm. Thanks, God. Hi, Clover. And I would like go into all of my animals. And I kind of intuitively knew that was a tool that we can use. But as an adult, I haven't. Like, I guess I haven't even thought about the role that an animal could play. Like, I really feel like I might break down, but that's okay because other people are going to go through this too. But shit.
No worries.
So like with, cause I know there are other people have this too, with this horse who is like my therapy horse. When you're a child, you are intuitive. You ask questions that you don't think to ask as an adult. Mm-hmm. So how powerful is that to have like this old friend from the past come and present itself to in the future version of you, like little kid you, to present and notice those shifts, or bring up the conversation of like, remember when you used to want to do this when you were a kid? And look at you now, like whatever that is. And I was like, wow, I never considered that as like an option.
Right.
Have you seen that in your work?
I have. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I have a lot of kind of animals come back in, and we're in this, the society where we're so focused on what is physically in front of us. And it's kind of like in psychology, like if you take something out of a baby's view, they think it's gone, right?
Yeah.
They know, right? So it's kind of like, we laugh and we're like, oh yeah, we know like things out of our view are not gone. But when you think of it in more of like a permanent passing of like even like a human or an animal, we think that there's so much like something so permanent about them being gone. And I don't do a lot of like medium work. So I don't, really, I've done some, but I don't necessarily communicate with a whole lot of people that have passed and animals that have passed. So I don't do a lot of that work, but not saying that doesn't come through, like I said. But just knowing that that's still surrounding you. I mean, a lot of people feel presences where, you feel that presence, or, maybe like a grandma figure is in your space, or you feel that, like I said, my horse River, that was his name. He pops in all the time. And not just, at like random times, like if I'm riding another horse, he's there. Like there's interactions that happen that you can feel. Sometimes they'll take up some of that other animal space. And, they kind of, I do see that a lot. It's a lot. No worries. I mean, a lot of my work, especially with the intuitive coaching, is about not just that. What I work with a lot of other people on is bringing back that self-love, feeling and
well, you're pretty damn good cracking things right out the gate. I guess this is what that tells.
No, that's okay. So yeah, bringing in that self-love, feeling those feelings, and then reclaiming that inner power so that you can manifest your dreams. And that's what I do a lot of like all of my coaching is kind of based on that, even with an animal perspective. But so, you know, when we were talking a little bit earlier about just kind of what does my work really look like? It looks a lot like this. It looks like, you know, you're conversing, and I do bring some of that traditional therapy approaches into it, but it's so powerful when you do let that energy come back in, and when you feel those emotions, that is where we have that power. That is where everything continues to shift. A lot of us are so good about not wanting to feel those emotions because of, like, you know, maybe not the right time, or because of embarrassment about those feelings. But when you feel that, you process that, you shift that energy out, and you allow a lot of space for that new energy to come in. That's where manifesting comes into play. So
you're amazing. Okay. Please hold 2 seconds, because I'm about to be a blubbering mess. Okay, actually I do, because we do have our audience who's watching this too, while I run real quick and grab some tissue. Well done. I always say, Farhad, my husband, he's like, Ashley, you're a big bully, because like 90% of my clients are in tears because we're doing deep work. And for someone who does, I mean, this is just a beautiful testimony to someone who does deep work for myself and for my clients. There's like, obviously these little like pockets of stored energy in memories and history. I don't have animals. I haven't thought about animal communication. So that tells me that there's stuff in there that I haven't even looked at, because I didn't know to look at it, which is why I was just like, push the button. And it's like a volcano. Absolutely. But I want to hear about your testimonies with some of your clients too, with yourself and with your clients. And I'll be 2 seconds right back.
And while she's gone, kind of just touching on a little bit of, you know, doing that deep work. Like she said, we are constantly doing the deep work on ourselves. Coaches do the deep work as well. You know, everyone is kind of living this human experience while we're living this spiritual journey. That's what kind of the ascension, we're figuring out how to be human, and also how to be a spiritual being walking on this plane. So, you know, I love that she said, you know, she does her deep work, I do my deep work. We're all humans. We've all had experiences that are tough, that are getting us to where we need to go. And unpacking those is what really helps us move forward and get into that place of manifesting, get into that true self-love, where you really can get back to kind of that fifth dimensional self-love. So I just did a quick note about
yeah, that's amazing. That's so amazing. I feel like it's not the Ashley show, but I feel so I switched homes when I was younger, and so I actually never got to like see the death of an animal. And that was another thing too. There's no closure, right? There was no goodbye. It just like was being uprooted and then being uprooted throughout my life. And then I was like, I don't have any connections. And so I just think this is so beautiful. And even to see my reaction to this, right? Of like how powerful this stuff can be, and like how working with an animal communicator can create closure in an area maybe where it wasn't, or something was too soon. So that's really interesting. And so how do you I'm thinking of one particular friend who's probably actually watching this right now, and she does like rodeo queen stuff. And so she has a bunch of horses, and I know she has a horse that's like not sick, but it has some illnesses. Okay. And they didn't really know what that was. So if she were to work with you, would you like hold the phone up to the horse, or like how does that work?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So for people that are local, so I live in Colorado. So for people that are local, sometimes I'll go and do kind of a more in-person session, but I do a lot of mine remotely, because everybody feels energy, right? Like I can feel your energy right now. You can feel mine. We think about first impressions. You can, you know, feel into it. Energy is kind of this fifth dimensional thing that we all can tap into. So I tap into kind of their energy, that horse's energy. You don't have to be kind of physically close. So I don't even actually need to see a picture of the horse, because it's going to be in your field. So I'm going to pick up on that energy. I can pick up on that. I do a lot of body scans where I can kind of feel into like what the horse will show me, and I can feel it. So there's so many different ways. I don't know if your audience is super familiar with it, but that we can kind of interpret energy. So the first one is sometimes you can hear it. So sometimes an animal will speak to you. Sometimes, you know, a spirit guide speaks to you. Same thing with coaching. We can see it. So that's kind of where it's clairvoyance. Somebody can show you something. Animals do this more than people really I don't think I've actually ever encountered a person that's done this energetically, but animals sometimes will show you a metaphor for something. So they're having a really hard time getting over something, or you are having a hard time getting over something, and they're taking on that energy. They might show you like a mountain, and kind of show you the emotion around that. And then also we can feel it. And that's one of the biggest ones I really work with is feeling it. I kind of tap into people's fields and feel kind of what's going on in their physical body by what emotions and energies are blocking.
Yeah, I do a lot of medical intuitive work. Totally get it. Just doing that scan. And yeah, I just forgot, animals are so intelligent, right? Like, why wouldn't we be doing that? And man, that's super powerful. So the other thing, just a random question, I guess an animal, how they work is different, right? Like we primarily communicate, like most people will talk, they'll speak before they think. The animals, they'll think it before they do that, because they don't have the ability to really talk, right? In the way that we do. With my clients, I always get like a verbal confirmation of like, may I tap into your energy space kind of thing. And so with animals, is it something where you're just like, it's this agreement, like they've kind of brought you into their space to help with that too? Yeah.
So a lot of the times, like you said, animals are really intelligent. So if animals feel and pay attention to that energy connection a lot quicker than we do. So if their person is inviting me into their space, that animal already knows and has most likely made that agreement with me, because if you're booking a session, your animal's already okay with me tapping in.
I agree. Yeah.
I've had an animal tell me like, no, you're not going to tap in, because a lot of the time I think our animals they're in our energetic field a lot. And so they're kind of making those pushes, or they're acting on a behavior or doing something that's like, oh my gosh, I need an animal communicator because I don't know what's going on with my animal or something.
Yeah.
So they're already kind of there and they're aware of that. So yeah, but it's that agreement, and it's, like I said, sometimes it's verbal, but it really is just an agreement that when that session is booked, that animal's already aware because they're already feeling my energy. They're very on top of that.
I love it. As you were talking, I was thinking to myself, like, as a psychic, do you identify yourself as a psychic or just intuitive?
I mostly identify as intuitive. I think that the word psychic has a little bit of a bad rap for what it is. So I don't necessarily use that, but I also don't really like saying like I'm clairvoyant or clairaudient or all these different things. I like to say that I tap into my spiritual senses, because we all have them. So I kind of to say intuitive, because we're all listening to our intuition. We all have the spiritual senses. So that's kind of how I identify. I'm not huge about labels, so that's where I'm at.
Right. You're like, my name is Caitlyn.
Yeah.
That's who I am, and all that embodies in it. Yeah.
Right.
Those are definitely, like, I had to work into that title too, because I was like, oh, what does that mean? But you do have all of those like spiritual abilities, or those, I call them like my psyche senses,
Love that.
You have that. Yeah. That is so powerful. Forgot, I totally lost the other question I was going to ask you, because I'm completely blown away by this. So what does it look like if somebody wants to book a session with you? Is that like a 1 hour, a 2 hour? Like, how does that flow look like? Or what does it look like?
Start off with kind of depending what it is. If it's a intuitive healing session and it's with a person, I do 45 minutes and that's it. And then if it's animal communication, I do an hour. The reason I do 45 minutes is because there's a lot more emotion that comes up in those sessions. And you're kind of, a lot of times when you go to a first session, you're kind of starting to shift some energy, and you're going to have a lot of like detoxing or a lot of energetic shifts after. So it's a lot of energy to take on. You've got a lot moving around. So 45 minutes is more than enough for a lot of people, the first session. And then animals, it's more, I leave it open to an hour. It's not always an hour, but it's kind of as much as they want to share, and we're also tapping into kind of both people and the animal. So that's kind of what I do it as far as that. I do offer like packages of, I think I do 3 and 5, and you can do of either kind of discounted rates, because it is such a journey. And I think that's also one of the biggest miscommunications about, and misconception about animal communication, is that it's kind of this one-time thing where you're like, what does my animal have to tell me today? And then you're kind of like, okay, that's it. But we really dive into how that affects your energy. And I also dive into a lot with the animal, like what does the diet look like? What does their body look like? What does their energy look like? And then we also talk a lot about putting up those energetic boundaries between you and your animal, so that they're not taking on everything that's going on in you. So that's kind of how my sessions look.
That's awesome. As you were talking, because I am a medium, but it was cracking me up because I was like, do you do this with kids too? Because sometimes my 4-year-old, I'm like, in what world? I guess that'd technically be what I do, right?
Yeah.
Who knows? But
Yeah.
um,
I don't.
I
I
remember.
actually have never worked with kids, except in my more
Okay.
like my kind of background in human services. I worked a lot with kids, unfortunately, with child abuse. And so I actually don't work with kids at all because of just my personal work with how tough it was to deal with that. I still have a lot of personal work I need to deal with in myself to kind of get past all the things I had to see and hear and deal with. So, that's kind of a sore point for me. So I don't work with kids actually on any.
Yeah, same here. Like,
Yeah,
I mean, I can, but it's the same thing. Like, clearly, like the animals was for me too. It's when it's an easy button to push for me.
yep,
That
it's too close.
yeah, gotta do a lot of work with it.
Yeah.
And I remember what I was going to say was, like, as a psychic, and you mentioned like the name and how it gets a bad rap. I completely agree. I totally agree with you on that. And there are a lot of like misconceptions because there have been, just like there are in any professional field, there will be like, and can be like a bad egg, right? Who isn't working in the light, who isn't of the highest service of all. That can be like, it could be a doctor, it could be anyone, right? But psychics have that too.
Right.
And I had to warm up to that idea of even identifying myself with that title. And I bring this up because that's become a part of my mission of like who I am and what I do and what I represent is I redefine the word. And same with you, right? Like whatever title we have. And so a huge part of Thought Leader Thursday is for me to bring on people who understand like the esoteric and the metaphysical and who are in the spiritual realm, who stand in the light, who stand for being of the highest service for people. That's important to me because honestly, like I know what it takes for myself personally as a psychic to be a clear channel. I don't just like live life and then do a session. No, like my eating is on point, my supplements, my sleeping, my relationships. Like if something is not of the highest vibration in my space, like it's gone because I just can't risk that for my clients either. Right. Like, and so I wanted to say, like you, I'm so happy to meet you and to hear what you're doing and the amazing work that you're doing because I do fully endorse everything that you're saying, and just seeing you and hearing your voice, like you have that. Like you are of the type of person that I would want to schedule with, or I'd want my friends to see. So thank you for being a part of Thought Leader Thursday and just shining your light.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And real quick, you touched on redefining the word. And I just love that you said that because I just wrote a blog and I actually just did a teaching about labels and redefining. So the blog was about being selfish because it was the whole idea of in human services, there's a big idea that no act is selfless because you're always benefiting out of it some way, whether it's a good feeling. And so that whole idea to me, I had a hard time swallowing that because, it's like, oh, if you're helping someone, you're being selfish. And there's such a bad rap with being selfish. So I talk a lot about redefining what selfish is and that you should always put yourself first, because if you're not, like you said, if you are not a clear channel and you're not there to be able to show up 100% and you're not taking care of your own stuff, you are not able to help people. You cannot give people what you don't have. And so that's why my journey, I struggled and I wanted to be a coach for a couple of years. And, because I said I always loved helping people, but I had so much baggage that I had to go through and filter through, and you constantly remove stuff, but it's different areas where you're able to help. And then the labels thing, real quick to touch on that too with the psychic. I just did a teaching on labels, and I talked about how we're built in this society that is so just so focused on labeling us. When somebody asks you, oh, it's nice to meet you. What do you go into? Hi, my name is blah, blah, blah. This is what I do for my career.
I'm a mom. I'm a wife.
Mom, I'm this. Yeah. And we live by these labels. So I did a teaching on kind of taking a step back from that label and looking, even if you want to identify as a label, you're a mom. Okay, how does that feel? And start to identify yourself as a feeling. Somebody asked you, who are you or what do you do? I'm happy. I'm this. I'm
yeah.
It sounds goofy, and I know it's
great.
Out of people's comfort zones, but this is what I do, because the more you identify with the feeling, the more you identify with that in your life, the more the universe is going to bring that feeling in, and then you're going to raise that vibration. So, instead of identifying as I'm this, this, and this, what did those emotions look like? What does that mean to you?
Yeah.
So I know it's totally goofy because like when they're going to look at you like, what? But we're so focused on labels of, what box can I put you into? And we are just, so, you look at this idea of, and I go on so many tangents, I apologize.
No, I love it. No, keep it going. Like I love getting to know you, and I know our audience definitely is as well. And I just had the biggest smile on my face because I love shock factor things like that.
Yeah,
I mean, when I meet someone new and I'm like, oh, I'm a psychic, I love their face.
right?
Because it's immediately like, well, it depends on what group of people I'm in or their age range, right? Like if it's an older person, they're usually like, but it's like my generation, they're like, oh gosh, tell me more. I like the shock factor. So I'm like, that's a good one.
Yeah. I mean, I love it because, I get the same thing when I tell people, oh, I'm an intuitive healing coach and animal communicator. That's the one that really throws people for a curveball. They're like, what? Are you a dog whisperer? And they kind of, and I'm like, yeah, actually I am.
Yeah.
But anyways, like I was saying, kind of also you think about those labels, and so take like a nurse, for example, that idea of I'm a nurse. Think about how many people are nurses and how every single one of them is completely different. So it's like we group people into these boxes so that we can figure out where to place them and what to feel about them, instead of listening to our intuition and listening to our emotions about what we feel about that person.
Yeah.
We have to group them into this label in a box. So I like to get out of that. And that's, like I said, one of my the main thing I work on with any client is to get back to that feeling, because the feelings is where all of our power is at. And when you feel that, you move through it, you manifest, you process. It's just, that's where it's at, feeling it 100%. And then you go into mindset and you go into all these different things, and it all kind of falls into place. But
Totally.
that feeling is that intuitive nudge. So.
And I talk to people about manifesting backwards too, right? Yeah. Like people are like, oh, I want a car. Okay, well, let's look at that. It's a surface level thing, right? But when you get the car, how's that going to make you feel? And then you dig. It's like, how's it going to make you feel for you? So you find the root feeling, and then how can you create that now? And for like a car, for example, that might make you feel like freedom. And so how can you feel freedom right now? You can go dancing, right? And so how can you experience that now, be that vibrational match, and then raise it from there? So yeah, high five to that. I love it.
I did a manifesting training on that too. And I talked a lot about that, and then also how that car can also just kind of be a metaphor for you wanting that feeling in your life. So that car you absolutely could not even want. It's just how your spirit is able to show you want that feeling, because we don't know how to tap into our feelings. So,
yeah. So rad. So people want to connect with you. They're like, I am so in it to win it. This girl is amazing in all the ways, and I want to do work with her. What is the best way to connect with you?
So, either Facebook or Instagram or my website. So, my Facebook, you can get on here, Caitlyn Picerno, and then that's my personal page, but it's linked to my business page, Intuitive Healing Coach. And then, Animal Communicator. And then, my Instagram is Caitlyn.Intuitive Healing Coach, because Animal Communicator is just way too long for that.
Yeah.
And then my website is CaitlynPicerno.com. So it's my first and last name.com. You can contact me anyway. I'm pretty quick about responding, because I'm here to serve, and that's, I love connecting with all of you guys. It's, why I do the work I do. So
yeah, I love that. And I'll have all the links attached to this video too. So if you guys are curious, you can just click there. And then one last question for you, just a personality question. What is your favorite word, and what does it taste like?
Ooh, oh my gosh. What a great question.
But I like the shock factor here.
One word that I have really been living for right now is blissful. And to me, it's like, this will be a kind of odd representation, but when you take like that, like you put a really like cool mint in your mouth, and then you like breathe in, or you take a sip of water, and it's like, it's like a super deep, like cool, that's what it feels like and tastes like to me.
Wow, that is like the coolest answer that I ever did hear. Yeah,
I'm glad.
See, when you're intuitive, things like that will come to you, right? Because that just shows, oh my gosh, like I just adore you. But how mindful do you have to be able to just like have that world in your that word in your thought bubble so easily that you can just pull it down? and then also being so mindful of those experiences to tie the two together. Like it's a huge personality question. And I love how you handled it too. You know what, I'll say another thing, they say you can tell a lot about a person in like that first impression, but also in their handwriting. There are all these little bits. And how you even answered that question, it wasn't like a panic. It was like, I got this, you know, and that is what you want in a practitioner. And I remember for myself personally, struggling with mental health and all sorts of things. Needless to say, like, I'm psychic. No one taught me that, right? They're like, you're crazy, take this medication.
Yep.
But I felt, yeah. Yeah. And I would feel like I would go to see them for help, and they're like, I don't know what to tell you, figure it out. And I felt hopeless. Mm-hmm. And so that's my mission as a psychic, to be the role model that I needed at every age, but also help find the solutions that nobody could find for me, right? And I feel that very same for you, where even your response to that question, it wasn't like, oh man, I can't think of one. It was like, let me think about this, because I'm a solution finder, and this is what I do and who I am, and boom. So that's just a beautiful question, and I love it. I love it. And I adore you. Thank you so much for being on here. Do you have any last things that you want to share with our audience? Possibly a tip on how to elevate their lifestyle from mediocre to magical?
You know, you had asked me about this question, and I was like, all right, what can I really tell people that makes a difference? And I think, you know, like I said, I've honed in on this. So if you haven't been listening, now's the time to listen. About emotions. We get so freaked out to tap into our emotions. And like I said, a lot of us have experiences that have been really tough. And working with the populations that I've worked with in, you know, really tough times of their lives, the one thing that people really are afraid of and step into this fear is feeling those emotions. And, you know, when I say feeling the emotions, I don't want people to think that, you know, you're stepping back into that traumatic time or something like that. When you're feeling the emotion, you're opening up that ability and letting kind of your higher power know, I'm open to feeling this emotion. I'm open to processing it. And that can look like many different ways. You know, one of the biggest things when I was going through my personal journey, and as I'm going through my personal journey, was that I really had to learn is that just because I had a really traumatic experience, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to sit there and bawl my eyes out. Yes, that might be how it comes up, but you also might have hysterical bursts of laughter, and that's how that process. So don't be afraid to tap into those feelings and to feel it, because once you have felt it, you're processing, you're releasing, and you open up to new things. If you hold on to that, it will manifest in physical places in your body, and it'll keep you in that fear space. And fear is the one thing that doesn't allow us to move forward into manifesting. That's what holds us back. And it's like, I love that saying, your goals and your dreams are the next step over fear. Once you get past that fear, you are in alignment, you are pushing forward, and things start coming your way. And that's when you start to love yourself. That's when you're in your inner power, and that's when you're connecting. So feel those feelings, and don't be afraid to do so. Be kind of the biggest thing about elevating their life, because you will get from mediocre to magical, just like you talked about.
Totally. Yeah. And advocating for yourself in that way. I remember with having a lot of trauma in my childhood, and I was so afraid. I'm glad you brought this up. I was so afraid to go back, because I'm like, I made it through that. I don't want to look at it again. Yeah. And so what I realized is, and there are a lot of things that I had processed, and it was fine. But there's some scarier things, and I didn't want to go back there, because there's still a piece of me that was anchored in the past, keeping me from moving forward. So even going there and doing the process work, letting the feelings that I'd like packed down, letting that come up to the surface, it turned it from a traumatic memory or a traumatic experience to just a memory.
Absolutely.
Where I can look at it. And that was the biggest thing, where I'm like, that's the goal here. It's not to re-experience it and then like hope you get through it. It's from a traumatic experience to just a memory. Because if it's still in our field, we're still experiencing it every day. It's just manifesting in a different way.
Right. And the thing, you know, a lot of people, I've had this question a lot, so I'll just kind of put it out there, is a lot of people ask, you know, why didn't you go the traditional route of going to like social work or therapy, or, you know, even combining this a little bit? And the reason that I didn't feel the traditional stuff worked as much is because a lot of it's based on talk therapy. Some of it's super helpful, but for me, I had a lot of trauma as a child too. And when I was 8 years old, I started traditional therapy, and I was in therapy until I was 18. I was suicidal. I had a ton of trauma in my life. And every time I went to see a new therapist, I just sit there and they told me, tell me your story. And it was,
oh my gosh.
and I hated that because I was like, I'm reliving this. So one thing I think is so beautiful with kind of the coaching that Ashley and I do is, and so many other coaches, is that when you work with a spiritual coach, we don't need you to dig into your trauma. You're not reliving your trauma. You're not telling your trauma story. If you feel guided to tell the story, you can, but we're not asking you to do so. We're looking at kind of the underlying emotion of what happened in your body that's manifesting, and we're releasing that without having to talk about it repeatedly. And that's what I think the biggest just shift between the traditional and the spiritual is, that is so powerful about what we do. Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing, man. I love that. I remember the exact same thing. And I'm like, I don't need to start there.
Yep. Absolutely.
Like, this isn't for me. This is for you. I remember being so fired up. And you're right. And I think because like our experience becomes our credential. I really do believe that. If you're like, why didn't you get certified in this? Or that's like, our experience is our credential. So right on, sister. Like, I am so happy to meet you. And thank you for coming on our show today. You guys definitely add her on Facebook, connect with her in any way that you can. Clearly, she's absolutely freaking amazing. And definitely in my circle, I do believe that you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time around. And Caitlyn, you are someone who I'm so honored to have you in my circle. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Ashley. It was so great to talk to you. And I'm so glad that you got vulnerable with us too.
I'm like, you want to see some realness? That is something that I do very well, especially in the academy.
If you're not real, I don't want to talk to you. So.
Right. Oh, and I want to share on this too. One of the things that that came through as an affirmation that I wrote on my journal is, the more people see the real me, the more, what was it? It was like, I could look it up. It's over there. But it was like, the more I show the real me, the more people love me for it, or something like, when I show the real me, people love me for it, or something like that. And it had just come through, and I wrote it down. I was like, that's huge. Because in a world where it's like, oh, you have to look prim and proper and thin and poised and perfect and Instagram ready. It's like, that's not a world I want to live in, right? But sometimes we can get caught up and swept away in it. And so, yes, thank you for creating the space for me to be authentic in the most unpredictable way.
We're all humans trying to figure out how to live in this spiritual and human journey, and it's messy and imperfect, and so are we. So might as well show it.
Yes, perfect. Well, I love you so much, friend. To everybody today, thank you for joining us. We love you and wish you an amazing day full of amazing things. All right. Bye.
Bye.